What would drive a princess, one of the most stoic, loyal, and famously private members of the royal family, to call security on her very own nephew? Pause for a moment and picture this: the third anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's passing. A day that should have been shrouded in silence, reverence, and the gentle glow of memory. Instead, it became a battlefield of legacy, betrayal, and humiliation. The world watched in shock as Princess Anne, the Queen's only daughter, raised her voice in fury, not against politicians, not against reporters, but against Prince Harry, her sister-in-law's youngest son. And her words cut deeper than any sword. "You destroyed the Queen." Try to imagine the weight of those words echoing through Windsor's halls. A private memorial turned into a public confrontation. A grandson turned into an outsider. And the woman who had always been called the Queen's Steel turned into his accuser. But what happened that day? Why did Harry even appear when he wasn't expected, or perhaps not even wanted? And most importantly, what did he carry in his pocket that sent and over the edge? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. These are not just idle questions. They strike at the very heart of the monarchy's survival. Because this wasn't just a family squabble, it was a reckoning over memory, respect, and what it means to belong to the House of Windsor. But let's pull back for a moment. 3 years. That's how much time had passed since the world lost Queen Elizabeth. 3 years since the bells of Westminster tolled and millions lined the streets in grief. 3 years since Britain and the Commonwealth said goodbye to the only constant they had ever known. For many, her death was not just the end of a reign, it was the end of an era. So when the third anniversary came around, the royal family intended for it to be a solemn remembrance, a day of unity in honor of a monarch who gave her entire life to duty. But unity is a fragile thing in this family. And on that day, it shattered like glass. Now here's where things get even more shocking. While most of the senior royals gathered quietly, paying their respects behind closed doors, Prince Harry showed up uninvited. He wasn't listed, he wasn't announced, and some say he wasn't even welcome. Yet there he was, walking into Windsor like a ghost returning to the scene of unfinished business. But why? Why risk humiliation? Why risk rejection? Could it be guilt, gnawing at him like an old wound? Could it be longing for the grandmother who had once been his anchor? Or could it be something darker, a deliberate attempt to insert himself into a family narrative that had moved on without him? I'll leave that for you to ponder. But here's what we do know. Harry's presence was not received as an act of love. It was seen as a provocation. Picture it: the quiet chapel, the family gathered in muted black, and her face carved in stone. William, stiff and unreadable. Catherine, regal but watchful. Charles, frail yet resolute. And then, like a storm breaking through a still sky, Harry appeared. All eyes turned. Murmurs rippled like waves. Can you feel the tension? The clash between silence and outrage? That's when Anne's patience cracked. She did not whisper. She did not walk over discreetly. She called security. She told the guards to remove him. And in a voice that carried across the room, she delivered that brutal indictment. You destroyed the Queen. But let's not rush. Because to understand the explosion of that moment, you need to understand the build-up. And isn't one to act rashly. She isn't Camilla, spinning webs of politics. She isn't Charles, prone to emotion. She isn't William, torn by duty and personal pain. And is the steel spine of the family, the one who endured, the one who rarely speaks, but when she does, every word lands like a hammer. So for Anne to snap, something extraordinary had to happen. Was it simply Harry's audacity to show up? Or was it what he carried in his hand, the object no one expected, that tipped her over the edge? Yes, there was something else. Something Harry tried to use as his shield. A sealed letter. He claimed it was from the Queen herself, written before she died. But was it real? Was it forged? Or was it something even more complicated? Truth twisted into something ugly? We'll get there. But first, let's linger in that moment. Because imagine how the Queen's legacy hung heavy in that room. She was the glue, the constant, the monarch who weathered crises from Diana to Diana's sons, from Camillagate to Megxit. And yet, 3 years after her passing, her family stood more fractured than ever. And in that fracture, Harry's arrival was like striking a match in a room full of oil. Now here's a question for you. What would you have done in Anne's shoes? Would you have embraced Harry, Let him sit quietly in the corner, let the day proceed without drama? Or would you have done what and did? Protect the memory of her mother by rejecting the man she believed betrayed her? It's not an easy question, is it? And that's why this story matters. Because it isn't just about royal squabbling. It's about respect. It's about grief. It's about how families fall apart when one member breaks the unspoken rules. And make no mistake, Harry broke them. He broke them years ago with interviews, memoirs, and accusations that tore into the very heart of the institution his grandmother embodied. For Anne, his mere presence at that memorial was an insult, a scar reopened. So what happened next? Security was called. Harry resisted. He produced the letter. William froze. Catherine intervened silently. And the entire room held its breath. Because this was no longer just a memorial. It was a confrontation for the ages. But before we dive into the blow-by-blow of that moment, let's rewind further. Let's look at how grief and betrayal had been building up in this family since the Queen's death. Let's peel back the layers of silence, glances, and whispered remarks that turned one grandson into a pariah. Because the truth is this, the memorial was just the spark. The fire had been smoldering for years. And when Anne's words rang out, "You destroyed the Queen," they weren't just about that day. They were about everything that had led up to it. But here's the twist. While Anne's fury burned bright inside Windsor's walls, outside, the world had no idea what was unfolding. Reporters waited for the standard photos, the official statements, the polished commemoration. They didn't know that inside, history was being rewritten in real time. And then, when Harry was escorted out, that history spilled into the open. Cameras caught his face. Microphones picked up murmurs. And suddenly, the memory of the Queen was no longer about unity, but about division. So ask yourself this. Did Anne protect her mother's legacy? Or did she deepen the very rift Elizabeth spent her life trying to heal? That's the contradiction at the heart of this drama. And it's a contradiction we'll explore in every detail, because every word, every gesture, every silence carried weight. But remember, this is only the beginning. We haven't even touched on William's frozen reaction, Catherine's silent but devastating signal, the letter in Harry's pocket, the media frenzy that followed, or Meghan's inevitable counterattack. Each piece will fall into place. Each twist will deepen the story. And if you think this was just a momentary family spat, think again. This confrontation could redefine Harry's standing forever, not just with his relatives, but with the public, with the monarchy, with history itself. So buckle up, because what happened at Windsor on that anniversary is more than scandal. It is tragedy, betrayal, and perhaps the most public reminder that even royals bleed when the bonds of family break. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What's more dangerous in a room full of royals, a shouted accusation, or the silence that comes before it? Think about it. Silence can suffocate. Silence can accuse without words. Silence can feel like judgment pressing down on you until your knees want to buckle. And on that day, inside the sacred halls of Windsor, the silence was deafening. Prince Harry had walked into the memorial like a shadow returning from exile. Every step echoed against the stone floor, and yet nobody moved to greet him. No one extended a hand. No one even nodded. Instead, there was only that tense quiet, the kind that tells you without speaking that you don't belong. Have you ever entered a room and instantly felt like an intruder? That's the energy Harry faced. And it wasn't just in his head. Every glance, every lowered gaze, every tightened jaw confirmed it. Now, let's pull the curtain back. This wasn't an ordinary gathering. This was the 3rd anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's death. A private commemoration meant only for the inner circle. The ones who had stood by her, who had carried her legacy with dignity. For Harry to appear unannounced was like a crack splitting through marble, something that made everyone sit up straight, hearts pounding with unease. And the Queen's only daughter noticed first. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked on Harry. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She studied him the way a hawk studies prey, calculating, unsentimental. And around her, others followed her lead. William stiffened. Catherine's gaze dropped. Charles closed his eyes as if bracing for impact. But Harry kept moving. His shoulders square, his expression unreadable, though the faintest flicker of nerves betrayed him. He wasn't supposed to be here, and everyone knew it. Why did he come? Was it guilt gnawing at him? Was it defiance, a need to prove he still belonged? Or was it desperation, a son chasing the ghost of the grandmother who had once been his only safe harbor? I ask you, if you were in his shoes, would you risk it? Would you walk into a place where you knew every stair would cut like a blade? Harry did. And that's where the tension began to thicken. Picture it. The family standing around the memorial, a simple arrangement of flowers, photos of Elizabeth in her prime, her voice faintly echoing from an old recording of a Christmas speech playing in the background. The room smelled of polished wood and lilies, heavy with history and grief. It should have been peaceful. But the moment Harry crossed the threshold, the air turned dense, suffocating. Nobody said a word. Not even Charles, who might once have broken the ice with a polite formality. Nobody moved to acknowledge Harry. It was as though he had walked into a painting where everyone else had already decided to freeze him out. And yet Harry didn't turn around. He walked further in. Each step seemed to scrape against the silence. Each breath seemed to echo too loudly. Until finally, he stopped, just a few feet from the front rows of the family. What do you think went through his mind in that moment? Did he hope someone would break? Did he hope and stern face might soften? That William's eyes might flicker with brotherly warmth? That Catherine, the peacemaker, might step forward? But none of it happened. Instead, silence screamed louder than words. This is the kind of silence that isn't neutral. It's heavy, judgmental, a silence that says, "We see you, but we don't accept you." And that silence cracked something open. Harry shifted uncomfortably, his hand brushing against his pocket. The same pocket where, later, he would reveal the mysterious letter. But no one knew that yet. What they saw was a man who looked both determined and deeply out of place. Anne's gaze hardened. She leaned slightly toward Charles, her lips tightening. William's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in something worse, disappointment. And Catherine, her expression was unreadable, but her hand subtly touched William's arm, a grounding gesture, a reminder to stay composed. That's when the whispers began. Low, hushed, but unmistakable. Courtiers at the back exchanging glances. A faint murmur rippling through the room like the first roll of thunder before a storm. Why is he here? Who told him? Did anyone invite him? Have you ever been the subject of whispers in a room? Felt eyes burning into your back as people judge you without speaking? That's what Harry was living in that moment. Still, he didn't retreat. He lifted his chin, as though daring them all to confront him. And in that act of defiance, the tension reached breaking point. Because here's the contradiction. Harry had once been the cheeky favorite, the boy who made his grandmother laugh, who reminded the queen of her own father's warmth. Yet here he was, years later, standing as the outcast. The same family that once shielded him now looked at him as if he had shattered something sacred. And Anne was the embodiment of that silent judgment. She had endured decades of scandal, of media storms, of watching her mother's legacy tested again and again. But she had never broken rank. She had never betrayed the monarchy. To see Harry walk in uninvited was, to her, not just a breach of etiquette. It was an insult to everything her mother had stood for. The silence could not hold forever. Something had to give. And it did. Harry opened his mouth. His voice was low, but in the silence it carried. I came to pay my respects. 6 words. That's all he said. But 6 words can change everything. Because rather than softening the room, his words hardened it. To the family, it didn't sound like respect. It sounded like intrusion dressed as sincerity. It sounded like a performance, another act in what they believed was Harry's never-ending drama. Anne's eyes narrowed further. Her hand twitched, as though she was about to gesture. William's lips parted, but he said nothing. Charles looked away. And Catherine, her gaze dropped to the floor, as if avoiding the storm she knew was coming. Silence fell again, heavy, condemning, and then movement, and straightened her back, her chin tilting upward, her shoulders squared like a soldier preparing for battle. Everyone felt it. The moment when silence was about to erupt into something explosive. But here's the thing. It wasn't yet words. Not yet. First came a look. A piercing, ice-cold glare that, and sent straight at Harry. A look that said everything without speaking. You shouldn't be here. You don't belong. You've crossed a line. Harry froze under that gaze. His jaw tightened. His chest rose and fell faster, betraying the storm brewing inside him. But he didn't back down. He met her eyes. That was the turning point. 2 forces colliding, Anne's fury and Harry's defiance. And everyone in that room felt it like static in the air, a storm charging up, seconds from striking. So, let me ask you, what happens when silence breaks? Does it explode like thunder, or does it cut like a knife? Because in the very next moment, and would open her mouth, and the words that came out would slice through the silence like steel. But before we get there, remember this. The tension wasn't just about that day. It was years in the making. Every scandal, every accusation, every interview Harry gave, every memoir page he wrote, all of it was echoing in that silence. All of it was written on Anne's face before she even spoke. And when she finally did, it wasn't just about Harry's presence. It was about everything he had done to her mother's memory. The silence ended. The storm began. And what Anne said next would send chills through every soul in that room. What happens when a lifetime of restraint finally cracks? Princess Anne had spent her entire existence carrying the weight of royal duty like armor. Silent, steadfast, unbending. The one member of the family who rarely faltered, who never spilled her emotions for the world to devour. But even steel can snap when pushed to its limit. And on that day, in that sacred hall, Anne's breaking point arrived. It started with her voice. Sharp, clipped, controlled, but edged with fury that was impossible to hide. She fixed her eyes on Harry and let the words fly. You destroyed the Queen. Can you imagine the weight of that accusation? For words, cutting, merciless, final. It wasn't just an insult. It was a verdict. A declaration that Harry's actions, his choices, his betrayals had tarnished the memory of the grandmother who had devoted her life to the throne. The room froze. William's head snapped toward Anne. Catherine's lips parted ever so slightly. Charles blinked in disbelief. Even the courtiers in the back gasped. Because Anne wasn't one for drama. She didn't lash out recklessly. So for her to say this, it meant she truly believed it. But why did Anne's fury ignite at that moment? Let's rewind. Anne had always been fiercely protective of her mother. More than any other sibling, she stood as Elizabeth's shadow, the reliable daughter who didn't need coddling, who didn't need scandal, who simply got on with the work. She'd seen her mother endure endless storms, Diana's tragic death, Camillagate, Andrew's disgrace. Through it all, and held firm. But Harry's betrayal? That was personal. And had been there when Harry was a boy, running wild around Balmoral, making the Queen laugh with his cheeky antics. She'd watched Elizabeth dote on him, shield him, even excuse him. The Queen had a soft spot for Harry. And in Anne's eyes, he repaid that love with disloyalty, by airing grievances, by branding the family cruel, by turning private wounds into public spectacle. So when he dared to walk into the anniversary memorial as if nothing had happened, and saw red, to her, it wasn't a grandson coming to honor his grandmother. It was a betrayer intruding on sacred ground. And that's why those words, "You destroyed the Queen," weren't just about the past. They were about the present moment. They were about drawing a line. Let me ask you this. If someone hurt your family deeply, insulted the one you loved most, and then showed up at their memorial uninvited, how would you react? Could you stay silent? Or would you, like Anne, let fury boil over? And chose fury. Harry flinched. You could see it in his face, the twitch of his jaw, the tightening of his fists. Those words hit him harder than any headline ever had. Because it wasn't a journalist saying it. It wasn't a politician. It wasn't even William. It was, and the one royal whose approval had always been steady, whose reputation was untouchable. And here's the contradiction. Harry came to show respect. At least, that's what he said. But his very presence was interpreted as disrespect. And didn't hear sincerity in his voice. She heard hypocrisy. She heard the grandson who had abandoned the monarchy now trying to cling to its symbolism for his own redemption. The silence after her outburst was brutal. Nobody rushed to soothe things. Nobody broke ranks to defend Harry. Not even Charles, the king himself, intervened. That's how much authority Anne carried in that moment. Her words landed like law. But Harry wasn't about to leave quietly. He straightened, his voice trembling but defiant. That's not true, he said. I loved her. I came because I loved her. Think about that. He thought love was his defense. But love, in Anne's eyes, meant loyalty. And loyalty was the one thing Harry had shattered. Her reply came like a whip. Love doesn't sell family secrets to strangers. Ouch. Can you feel that sting? The room seemed to shrink around them. Even William shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening, his eyes darting toward Catherine as if to ask, "Should I step by?" And wasn't done. She stepped forward, not much, just enough to make her presence loom larger. Her voice lowered, cold and deliberate. "You embarrassed her. You broke her heart. And now you dare to stand here as if you belong. Now pause here. Have you ever had someone strip you bare with words in front of a crowd? It's humiliating. It's enraging. And that's exactly what Harry felt. His face flushed, his lips pressed tight. You could almost see the tears threatening to break through, but he fought them down, unwilling to show weakness in front of the family that had already branded him an outsider. Yet, instead of backing down, Harry clung to his defense. "I have a right to be here. She was my grandmother." And that's when it snapped. Her voice rose, sharper, louder, echoing off the stone walls. "Then you should have honored her when she was alive." The words hit like a hammer. Boom. This wasn't just anger. This was grief. Grief twisted into rage. Grief weaponized against the one she blamed. And Harry's betrayal had aged her mother, had weighed her down in her final years. Whether fair or not, that's what she believed. And in that moment, she let the world know. Now here's the irony. Harry wanted to honor his grandmother by attending the memorial, but his attempt to show love only opened old wounds wider. His very presence became proof, that he hadn't learned anything. And here's where the contradictions pile up. Harry believed he was doing the right thing, and believed he was spitting on her mother's grave. Both believed they were protecting the Queen's memory, and both couldn't have been further apart. So where was Charles in all of this? Where was the king? Charles sat silently, his face pale, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. He looked like a man torn in two, his son on one side, his sister on the other, his mother's memory between them. But Charles had learned, sometimes silence is safer than words. And so he let and take the lead, even though his silence spoke volumes. But silence wasn't enough, and turned to the guards near the entrance. Her voice carried across the room, cold and commanding. "Remove him." Can you imagine the gasp that rippled through the room at those words? Security. Being called on a prince. A son of the king. A grandson of the queen. It was unthinkable. Yet it was happening. Right there, in front of the family, in front of history. Harry's eyes widened. His fists clenched. He shook his head. "You can't do this," he said, his voice breaking. "Not here. Not today." But Anne's reply was merciless. "Watch me." And with that, the guards began to move. Slowly, cautiously, as if unsure whether to really follow through on an order that felt so outrageous. But Anne's glare left no doubt. She meant it. "Now let me ask you, what would you do if you were Harry in that moment? Would you walk out quietly, swallowing humiliation for the sake of peace? Or would you dig in your heels and fight for your place, no matter the cost?" Harry chose the latter. He reached into his pocket. His hand emerged clutching an envelope. His voice cracked, but grew louder as he held it up for all to see. "She wrote this for me. My grandmother. Before she died." And just like that, the room shifted again. Because suddenly, it wasn't just Anne versus Harry. It was Anne versus the Queen's words. If the letter was real, if it truly came from Elizabeth, then everything Anne had just said could be undermined. The Queen's voice, even from beyond the grave, still carried power. And froze. Her glare faltered for just a fraction of a second. Around her, William stiffened. Charles's eyes widened. Catherine gasped softly. But Anne recovered quickly. Her jaw tightened. She didn't move toward the letter. She didn't even reach for it. Her voice came out like ice. "I don't need to read lies." Harry's hand shook as he held it higher. "It's not a lie. It's her words. She wanted me here. Do you see the shift?" The battle wasn't just about Harry's presence anymore. It was about evidence. About proof. About whether the Queen herself had left him a final message that could rewrite everything. The guards hesitated. The family held their breath. Anne, cold as ever, turned her head away from the envelope, refusing to even look at it. That's when the true chaos began. Because if Harry really did have a letter, if those words inside could vindicate him, then Anne's fury had just sparked a war that would extend far beyond Windsor's walls. And as the family stood frozen in shock, Harry's trembling hand held the key to either redemption or deeper disgrace. But what exactly was in that letter? Well, what came next would leave even the royals speechless. What would you do if the one piece of paper in your hand could change the course of your destiny? That's exactly what Prince Harry believed he held in that trembling envelope. A single letter, sealed and folded, supposedly penned by Queen Elizabeth herself before her passing. Was it genuine? Was it a forgery? Or was it something else entirely? An emotional plea written in her twilight days that the family never expected to see? Harry clutched it like a lifeline, his knuckles white, his eyes blazing with desperation. This was no longer just about being uninvited. This was about proving he still had a place, proving that his grandmother's love hadn't vanished with her last breath. He raised his voice, louder now, echoing through the chamber. You can send me out. You can call me a traitor. But you can't erase her words. She wanted me here. The silence cracked. Murmurs spread like wildfire among the family and courtiers. Even Charles, who had been frozen in dignified quiet, leaned forward ever so slightly. His brow furrowed. His lips parted. For the first time, he seemed ready to speak. But before he could, and cut across sharply, put it away. You insult her memory with this charade. A charade. That's what Anne thought. To her, this letter was nothing but a prop. A performance. Another attempt by Harry to twist the Queen's image to suit his narrative. And in Anne's eyes, the Queen deserved better than to be dragged into his battles even after death. But Harry wasn't backing down. He stepped forward, clutching the envelope to his chest. His voice broke, raw, almost pleading. She wrote this for me. She said I'd always have a place here. Do you want me to pretend it doesn't exist? To burn it? To let her words die with her? Now, pause for a moment. Imagine being in that room. Imagine the electricity in the air. On one side, Anne's fury, protective, unyielding. On the other, Harry's defiance, sharpened by grief and desperation. The rest of the family caught in between, silent witnesses to a clash that could scar them forever. But here's where the contradiction deepens. If the letter was real, then Anne's harsh words, "You destroyed the Queen," would unravel. Because how could he have destroyed her if she had written him a parting message of love and inclusion? Yet, if the letter was false, if it was fabricated, then Harry's very presence became even more disgraceful. William shifted uncomfortably, his jaw locked tight. His eyes darted to Catherine, who, as always, read him with perfect clarity. She gave the faintest nod, a silent message. Stay still, let this play out. Catherine knew the stakes. Any misstep could ignite an even bigger scandal. Meanwhile, Harry's hand shook as he held the letter higher. Read it, he demanded, his voice carrying an edge now. Read it, and you'll see she didn't turn her back on me. You'll see she wanted me here. Anne's glare didn't waver. We don't need to read anything. We know her. We lived beside her. We carried her burden. Don't you dare pretend your scraps of paper mean more than her life's work. The cruelty in her words stung. But it wasn't empty. It was built on years of loyalty, years of defending her mother against scandal, years of swallowing her own emotions for the sake of the crown. And in her eyes, Harry's letter was nothing compared to that. Harry's chest rose and fell, faster, heavier. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally. Charles looked down, silent. William remained still. Catherine's expression was unreadable, and glared. And Camilla, yes, Camilla, sat in the corner with the faintest smirk, as though enjoying every flicker of drama. And that's when Harry snapped. You think you can erase me? You think you can push me out like I never existed? But she wouldn't have wanted this. He shook the envelope violently, his voice rising. You may have forgotten who I am, but she didn't. Have you ever seen someone fight not just for their pride, but for their very existence? That's what Harry was doing. To him, this wasn't just about attending a memorial. It was about reclaiming an identity the family had stripped away. He wasn't just Harry, the estranged prince. He was Harry, grandson of the Queen, chosen recipient of her final words, or so he claimed. But here's the irony. The more he shouted, the more desperate he seemed. And desperation is a dangerous look in the world of royalty. Because dignity is their currency. Once you lose it, once you raise your voice or lose your composure, the battle is already slipping away. And seized on it. Her voice cut like glass. Then prove it. Open it. Read it aloud. Let us all hear what you think she said. The challenge was brutal. Harry froze. His eyes flickered. His hand trembled. Because here's the thing. Did he really want to reveal what was inside that letter? Did he even know if the family would accept it as genuine? Or was the power of the letter in its mystery, in the possibility that it might absolve him without ever being read. His hesitation said everything. The silence stretched again, and in that silence, the family began to doubt. Was the letter real? Or was this just Harry performing one more act in a long line of dramas? Harry licked his lips. His voice faltered. I don't need to prove it to you. She wrote it for me. For me alone. There it was. The contradiction. He wanted the letter to vindicate him publicly, yet he claimed it was private. He wanted it to prove his place, yet refused to let anyone else read it. And scoffed, her face hard as stone. Convenient. The word landed like a dagger, and whispers rippled again among the courtiers. Convenient. That's what it looked like. Convenient that Harry had a letter no one else could see. Convenient that he used it as a shield but refused to share it. Harry's defiance hardened. His voice shook, but his eyes burned. You can mock me. You can doubt me. But I know the truth. And one day, so will everyone else. His words hung in the air. Ominous. Defiant. Almost threatening. Charles shifted uncomfortably, his lips pressing into a thin line. William's fists tightened at his sides. Catherine's gaze flickered between and in Harry, measuring every second like a chess match. And then came the moment that made the room gasp. Harry stepped closer to Anne, not aggressively, but firmly. He held the envelope out toward her, his hand trembling. Here, if you really think I'm lying, take it. Read it. Anne's eyes dropped to the envelope, then back to Harry. Her jaw tightened. For a second, just a second, it looked like she might reach out. But then she drew back. I won't touch it, she said coldly. Because whatever is inside, it doesn't change what you've done. You chose your path, and no piece of paper will undo it. Boom. It was devastating. Because in that instant, Anne rejected not just the letter, but Harry himself. She made it clear that no words, past, present, or future, could erase what she believed he had done to the Queen's memory. Harry's face twisted, a mixture of rage and heartbreak. His voice cracked as he spat back. You can't erase her love for me. You can't. But here's the tragedy. Love, in the royal world, is never simple. It's tangled with duty, with loyalty, with silence. And in Anne's world, Harry had already broken those threads beyond repair. The guards still hovered near the doorway, uncertain. The family remained still, locked in this battle of wills. And Harry, clutching his letter like a weapon, knew he was losing control of the narrative. So he tried again, softer this time, almost pleading. Please, just let me stay. For her. For 1 hour. That's all I ask. The plea echoed. And for a moment, it seemed like someone might soften. William's eyes flickered. Catherine shifted. Even Charles seemed on the verge of speaking, but Anne didn't flinch. She raised her chin, her eyes blazing. 1 hour? You had years, and you wasted them. The words slammed into Harry like a final blow. His shoulders sagged. His hand dropped. The envelope dangled loosely at his side. And just when it seemed like he might crumble completely, something unexpected happened. Harry straightened. His eyes hardened. His voice, though quiet, carried a new edge. If you force me out today, you'll regret it. Because I won't stay silent anymore. I'll tell the world everything. Gasps rippled. Even and blinked. The threat was clear. Harry was no longer just defending himself. He was warning them. But was it a bluff? Or was he truly prepared to unleash more revelations, more secrets, more wounds upon the family already fractured by his memoirs and interviews? That was the question hanging in the air. And the answer? Well, what came next would prove that Harry's threat was far more dangerous than anyone realized. What does it look like when a prince, once beloved by the world, is treated like a trespasser in his own family's house? It looks like this. 2 tall men in dark suits, standing near the entrance, suddenly shifting forward when Princess Anne's voice cut through the air with icy finality. Remove him. That was the order. And this was the moment when everything tipped from private feud to public humiliation. Now pause and think about this. These weren't just guards. These weren't faceless men tasked with crowd control. These were royal protection officers, men who had once shadowed Harry himself, men who knew his routines, his quirks, his vulnerabilities. And now, on Anne's command, they were stepping toward him, not as protectors, but as enforcers. Can you imagine how that must have felt? Once, they would have followed Harry into battle. Now, they were preparing to escort him out like a gatecrasher at a party. Harry stiffened. His jaw clenched. His grip on the envelope tightened until the edges bent. He looked from Anne's glare to the advancing guards, and for a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Would he go quietly, or would he resist? Let me ask you, if you were in Harry's shoes, would you bow your head and walk out, saving what little dignity you had left? Or would you fight for your place, even if it meant chaos? Harry chose chaos. Don't touch me, he snapped, his voice rising. His eyes burned as he looked directly at the guards. Not here. Not today. I am her grandson. I have every right to be here. The tension exploded. The guards froze, unsure whether to lay a hand on him. Because this wasn't just a disruptive guest. This was a royal prince. Even if estranged, even if despised, he carried a title that complicated everything. Touching him, dragging him out, it wasn't just physical removal. It was symbolic. It was history being rewritten in front of everyone's eyes. And the family knew it. William's face flushed. Catherine's hand hovered over his wrist, silently urging restraint. Charles shifted uneasily, torn between protecting his son and honoring Anne's fury. Camilla, ever the silent observer, tilted her head with the faintest glimmer of satisfaction. But Anne didn't waver. Her voice cut through the chaos. Do it. Those two words slammed like a hammer. And slowly, the guard stepped closer. Harry's voice cracked, louder now. Don't you dare. Don't you dare treat me like this in front of my grandmother's memory. His hand shook as he raised the envelope higher, almost like a shield. She wanted me here. She said it herself. I won't leave until I've honored her. Do you see the contradiction? He was begging to stay, yet threatening to unleash secrets. He was grieving, yet defiant. He was both victim and aggressor in the same breath. And that contradiction was tearing the room apart. The guard stopped just a step away, close enough to reach for him if needed. And Harry took a step back, his shoulders brushing against the heavy wooden pew. He looked cornered, like a lion trapped in a cage. Then, something startling happened. He extended the letter, not to Anne, not to Charles, not even to William, but to Catherine. Yes, Catherine, the Princess of Wales. The woman he had once laughed with, once admired, once described as the sister he never had. The same Catherine he had later wounded with barbed words in interviews and memoirs. Why her? Why in that moment did Harry choose Catherine as his lifeline? Because deep down, he knew Catherine still carried the image of compassion, of fairness. If anyone would read the letter without bias, without venom, it would be her. At least, that's what Harry hoped. Kate, he said, his voice breaking into raw vulnerability, please, take it, read it. She trusted you too. She loved you. Don't let them silence me. The room gasped. All eyes turned to Catherine. And here's where the emotional twist cuts deepest. Catherine didn't move. She looked at Harry, her face a perfect mask of calm, her eyes betraying only the faintest flicker of pity. She didn't reach for the letter. She didn't break rank. Instead, she gave a subtle shake of her head. It was devastating. Harry's hand trembled. His lips parted as though he'd been struck. Because Catherine's refusal wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel, but it was final. And in that silence, her rejection hurt more than Anne's fury ever could. Anne seized the moment. Enough, she barked. Her voice filled the chamber like thunder. Take him out. The guards moved again. This time, firmer. Closer. One reached for Harry's arm. And Harry snapped. Don't touch me, he shouted, pulling back violently. The letter crumpled in his fist. His face red with rage and humiliation. You'll regret this. All of you. You think you can erase me, but you can't. I'll make sure the world knows what really happened. That was the breaking point. Because until then, his threat had been vague. But now, with the entire family watching, he doubled down. He made it clear, if they forced him out, he wouldn't go quietly into the night. He would go nuclear. And here's the irony. By resisting, by shouting, by threatening, Harry only reinforced Anne's words, that he had destroyed the Queen. Because in that sacred space, on that solemn day, instead of quiet remembrance, the focus was on his rage. The guards, caught between duty and history, hesitated once more. Their hands hovered over his arms, their eyes flicking to Charles, silently asking for confirmation. Should they really do this? Should they really drag the king's son out of the chapel? Charles still didn't speak. He looked broken, torn. His lips pressed together, his eyes glistening. He wanted to intervene, but he couldn't, or wouldn't. Someone spoke for him. He forfeited his place long ago. Remove him. Boom. There it was. The death sentence to Harry's dignity. The guards finally acted. One reached firmly for Harry's elbow, the other moved to his back. Harry stiffened, his voice hoarse with fury. Don't you dare. But before he could finish, William stepped forward. The room froze again. Because William's reaction, silent, frozen, unreadable, would shape everything that came next. What does it mean when silence speaks louder than words? William stood there, rigid, pale, his eyes locked on his younger brother. Around him, the room seemed to blur, the guards waiting and seething, Charles crumbling, Catherine steadying. But William was frozen, and that silence was deafening. Harry's challenge still hung in the air. You'll have to decide whose side you're really on. It wasn't just a plea. It was a demand, a line in the sand. A brother daring his brother to choose between blood and crown, between loyalty and love, between forgiveness and fury. So why didn't William speak? Why didn't he rise to the moment and declare his side? Because William was trapped. Here's the contradiction. William had every reason to side with Anne, to reject Harry once and for all. Harry had insulted him in interviews, mocked Catherine, branded the monarchy cold and cruel. Yet, in the same breath, William had every reason to hesitate. Because despite everything, this was still his brother, the boy he grew up with, the only one who truly knew what it meant to lose Diana, the only one who shared that scar. So William did what he often does when the stakes are unbearable. He froze. Now, have you ever been in a situation where one word from you could change everything? Where silence feels safer than speaking, but every second of that silence only makes the tension worse? That's what William was living. Anne's eyes cut toward him, sharp and impatient. She wanted him to speak, to stand by her, to crush Harry's defiance with royal unity. Charles's gaze flickered too, pleading silently for his eldest to take control. Even Catherine, always the composed strategist, watched him closely, her hand still gently on his arm, urging him without words to stay calm. But William said nothing, and that nothing spoke volumes. Harry smirked. A bitter, broken smirk, but one that carried triumph. See, he said, his voice trembling. He can't even look at me. He knows I'm right. He knows I belong here. The jab hit its mark. William's jaw tightened. His nostrils flared. His eyes, blue and cold, finally locked on Harry. And here's the twist. Instead of fury, instead of rage, what flickered there was pain. Real, raw pain. Because Harry wasn't wrong. William did know, deep down, that his brother belonged by blood. But blood was no longer enough. Finally, after what felt like hours, William spoke. His voice was low, deliberate, every word dragged from the pit of his chest. You don't understand, Harry. It's not about whether you belong. It's about what you've done. The word sliced. Not loud, not cruel, but heavy with disappointment. Harry's face twisted. What I've done? You think I'm the one who destroyed this family? You think it was me who broke everything apart? His voice rose, echoing off the stone walls. I told the truth. That's my crime. I refused to stay silent while the lies ate us alive. And there it was. The contradiction at the heart of their feud. Harry called it truth. William called it betrayal. Both believed themselves righteous. And in that gap, brothers became enemies. William's voice sharpened. Truth? You call it truth when you drag our lives through cameras and books for money. When you humiliate Catherine. When you twist every moment into victimhood. That's not truth, Harry. That's selfishness. Ouch. The sting was immediate. Harry flinched, his face reddening. Selfishness. I left because I couldn't breathe here. I left because I was drowning. And you stayed. You let them use you. You let them turn you into their puppet. The room went still. The word puppet echoed like a bomb. Even Anne's eyes widened slightly, shocked at Harry's boldness. Catherine's grip on William's arm tightened, not to restrain, but to remind. Hold steady. William inhaled sharply. His lips pressed into a thin, white line. And then, with controlled calm, he answered. Better a puppet than a traitor. Boom. The air cracked. Gasps filled the chamber. That one sentence, the first time William had ever said it aloud, cut through everything. Puppet or traitor. That was the choice Harry had forced on them. And William had chosen his side. Harry's eyes burned. His hands shook, the crumpled remains of the letter still trembling in his grip. His voice was hoarse, almost broken. So that's it then. You'd rather serve than think. You'd rather wear the crown and chains than stand by your own brother. William's reply came fast. I'd rather protect the crown than destroy it. Do you feel the knife twisting deeper? This wasn't just about grief anymore. This was about identity, about destiny. William saw himself as protector. Harry saw himself as truth-teller. Both convinced the other was the real enemy. Charles finally stirred, whispering hoarsely, "Enough." But it was too late. The fire had been lit. Harry took a step closer, his voice rising. You think you're protecting her? You think you're protecting Granny? She saw through all of you. That's why she gave me this. He held up the letter again, shaking it violently. She knew I'd be the only one brave enough to say what no one else would. Anne's fury erupted. Bravery? You call this bravery? This is exploitation. The clash grew louder, voices colliding like swords in battle. The guards hovered, unsure whether to intervene. Courtiers whispered furiously at the back. And through it all, William remained eerily calm. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his fists. Instead, he let silence reclaim him, his icy stare fixed on Harry. That silence, the same silence that had once been hesitation, now became something else. A weapon. A rejection. Harry broke first. Say something. Say you still see me as your brother. Say it. But William didn't answer. He just stared. And that silence, more than words, told the truth. The bond between them was shattered. Now let me ask you, what's worse? Being cursed, screamed at, told you're hated? Or being met with silence from the person who once swore to stand beside you forever? Because Harry realized in that moment that silence was deadlier than any insult. His voice dropped, softer now, filled with despair. You really won't fight for me. William's face twitched. For a flicker of a second, his eyes glistened. A hint of tears. But he blinked it away, jaw tightening once more. And then Catherine, who had been silent all along, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, steady, but carried through the chaos like a bell. Harry, enough. The simplicity of her words carried power. Because Catherine wasn't screaming. She wasn't judging. She was ending it. With quiet authority, she drew the line. Harry's shoulders sagged. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. He looked at her, at William, at Charles, at Anne. And for the first time since he walked in, he looked small. But even in defeat, his defiance wasn't gone. His lips curled into a bitter smile. You'll regret this silence. One day, you'll see whose side history takes. The words were haunting, almost prophetic. And as he turned, his eyes lingered on William one last time. A stare that carried pain, fury, love, and loss, all in one. William didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He remained frozen. And that frozen silence would haunt Harry long after he left the room. But here's the twist. Just when it seemed the confrontation was finally over, Catherine did something subtle, something only those closest to her noticed. She touched William's wrist, a small, almost invisible gesture. And in that moment, Harry realized she had stopped William from saying what he truly wanted to say. And that revelation lit a new fire in his mind. Because what words had Catherine prevented? What truth had William been about to speak before she silenced him with a touch? That was the question Harry carried as the guards closed in again. And the answer to that question would explode later, in a way no one saw coming. What can a single fingertip do that 1,000 words cannot? A touch on the wrist. Barely there. Almost invisible. Yet it carried the weight of a decision that reshaped the entire room. Catherine didn't tug. She didn't squeeze. She simply placed 2 fingers against William's pulse, as if taking his temperature, as if feeling his heartbeat, as if reminding him that the kingdom beats slow, steady, measured. Not frantic. Not rash. Not today. Did you see it? The microsecond where William's jaw softened, then reset, where his eyes brightened with something truthful, something raw, something he was about to say. And then he didn't. That's the moment Harry clocked. That's the moment that shouldn't have mattered but suddenly meant everything. Because words unsaid can be louder than the ones shouted. And Catherine, calm, elegant, calculated, understood that better than anyone in that hall. Ask yourself, what would you do if the person you love was about to speak a truth that would blow the room to pieces? Would you let them? Would you watch the splinters fall where they may? Or would you lay one quiet hand on the detonator and choose, instead, to never push? Catherine chose to never push. Harry saw it. He didn't misread it. He couldn't have. He knew the old bond, the silent language that had kept their trio alive in happier years. Glances at charity events, the half-smile over someone's awkward toast, the shared patience with crowds and cameras. He also knew the new language, the careful choreography that keeps a royal family from falling in on itself. Catherine, now more than ever, was the choreographer. She directed with gentleness, but the choreography was strict. One step out of line, and the dance collapses. So when her fingers touched William's wrist, a dozen things happened at once. William tamped the words back behind his teeth. Anne's glare refocused on Harry. Charles sagged with relief he mistook for composure. The guards continued their shallow breath vigilance. And Harry's heart, and here's the cruel irony, Harry's heart lifted for a moment. Because if Catherine had to stop William, then William had something to say. And if William had something to say, then maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the final severing Harry thought it was. Maybe there was still a hidden line tying them together, even if it cut like a wire. But then Catherine spoke the only two words that mattered. Harry, enough. Not loud, not sharp, and yet it ended the sequence like a gavel. Who is Catherine in this story? The peacemaker, the anchor, the unbroken line. But peacemaking isn't soft, not really. Real peacemaking is steel wrapped in silk. It's strategy pretending to be grace. It's the choice to control the narrative not by force, but by tempo. Catherine didn't need to win the room. She only needed to slow it down until winning became unnecessary. Have you ever controlled a conversation by deciding when not to speak? She has. Harry read it and tasted bitterness. He heard enough, and it felt like a door closing in his face. Yet beneath the sting, he clocked the meaning. William almost spoke. William almost deviated. William almost chose the brother over the crown, or at least the brother alongside the crown. Catherine prevented it. For the family. For the day. For the legacy. For him. Is that kindness or cruelty? Watch Catherine now. She doesn't hold anyone stare too long. She doesn't threaten. She doesn't move to the fire, to the letter, to the center of the stage. She stands beside William and holds a perimeter. The perimeter is dignity. The perimeter is the queen. The perimeter is the story they cannot afford to let Harry tell in their house. On this day, in this hour. Harry looks at her, really looks at her. And an old memory slices through. The three of them at a small reception years ago, somewhere safe, somewhere private enough to let their shoulders drop. Catherine's laugh, easy and unperformed. William's crooked grin. Harry's honesty unweaponized. He feels it for a second, like sunlight through cloud. And then it's gone. Because she is no longer just Catherine. She is the Princess of Wales with 1,000 years balanced on her spine, and she cannot move the way she used to without causing an earthquake. He tries anyway. Kate, he says, not Catherine, not HRH, not titles. You know what she meant to me. Don't stop him. Let him speak. Did you catch the pivot? He doesn't ask William. He asks her. Because he knows, if she releases the wrist, the words will come. Catherine doesn't blink. This is not the day, she says. For words. A boundary drawn in velvet that feels like stone. And exhales through her nose, a quiet victory. Charles stares at the floor. Relief looks like shame when you know you should have led. William keeps his gaze steady, letting Catherine's sentence be his own. And Harry takes a thin breath that sounds like defeat. But here's the twist. It isn't defeat. Not yet. Because in the calm that follows, the room hears something it had not heard all day. Not accusation. Not threat. Not order. It hears restraint. Old-fashioned, royal restraint. The thing the Queen was famous for, embodied in a woman who married into it and made it feel organic. Catherine restores that tone by refusing a brawl and choosing a funeral pace. Slow. Reverent. Non-negotiable. The contradiction pierces. Harry wants the truth spoken. Catherine wants the truth kept. Both believe they're honoring the Queen. A footstep. Soft. Deliberate. Catherine moves, one pace only. So she stands not between the brothers, but at their edge, where she can be seen without blocking, heard without elevating. It's a trick she's perfected, to be central without being the center. Harry, she says, and this time it's warmer, human, almost apologetic. You loved her. No one doubts that. But we cannot do this here. He opens his mouth, an argument ready, a grievance sharpened. But something in her tone makes him swallow the blade. She isn't diminishing his grief. She isn't calling him a liar. She is invoking the stage itself. The room. The moment. The queen. It's a masterclass in separating a man from his behavior without humiliating the man. Why does that sting more? Because when someone refuses to be your enemy, you lose the energy that makes defiance easy. He tries a different angle. Then say it later, he whispers. Say you'll meet me. Say you'll at least read the letter together. William glances at Catherine. She gives the smallest nod. The door is not bolted, only latched. We'll review it, William says carefully, like stepping onto ice he agrees is thin. Not now. There it is, the first concession of the day. And it doesn't come from Anne. It doesn't come from Charles. It comes through Catherine's corridor, a private promise, a later conversation, a place away from lilies and stone where nobody has to choose sides in front of ghosts. Harry hears it and wants to accept. He wants to grab it with both hands. But the room is still a pressure chamber. Anne's eyes are knives. The guards are hands waiting to become history. The courtiers are ears that feed headlines. And somewhere within him, the wounded boy misreads mercy as trap. Later means never with you, he says, sharper than he intends. Catherine doesn't rise to it. She breathes. She lowers her gaze, not in submission but in refusal to escalate. It is maddening to someone who wants a fight. It is also disarming to someone who wants to win. Which category is Harry in today? He tries again, softer. If I walk out now, will you call me tomorrow? Yes, Catherine answers, without delay, without flourish. Tomorrow. Is she promising on behalf of herself? William? The institution? The answer is the one royals live in. Yes. It isn't enough for Anne. He goes now, she says, a drumbeat. This is finished. Catherine turns her head, just an inch. Not a challenge. A check. The Princess Royal meets the Princess of Wales. One forged in duty from birth, the other hardened into it by fire. If you expected sparks, you misunderstand both. Their strength is not in clashing. It's an absorbing force without cracking. And, Catherine says, voice even, let him leave on his feet. Subtle. Devastating. Because it implies a different outcome, dragged, forced, disgraced. That, and would never want engraved in public memory. Catherine gives her a better ending without admitting the worst was on the table. A gift wrapped like a correction. And inhales, and for once, the steel bends. He leaves. No scenes, she concedes. Charles nods as if he willed that into being. William exhales as if a blade withdrew. Harry hears the word leaves and tastes iron. It isn't victory. It isn't peace. It is a corridor, maybe. Narrow. Unlit. But open. Catherine has one more move, and it's the smallest of the day. She steps back. Not away from William, not toward Harry, just back. She gives space for the brothers to fill, if they can. The gesture says, I won't speak for you. The gesture says, choose. Harry looks to William. He waits for a cue, a word, the slightest sign that tomorrow is not a ceremonial tomorrow but a real one. William's eyes soften. There it is, and then harden again. Because the room is watching. Because the crown is heavy. Because love and duty are bad roommates. Go on, William murmurs, almost inaudible. Please, please. A word with teeth filed down by sorrow. It lands between them like an unmailed letter. Harry nods. Not yes, not no, just a nod that says I heard you. He turns. He takes a step. The guards shadow, but they don't touch. Catherine has removed the theater of force, and with it, the headline that would have haunted them for a decade. Does that save him? No. Does it save them? Also no. It buys time. Time is currency here. Catherine is a banker. Halfway to the doors, Harry stops. He turns back. His eyes find Catherine first. Not pleading now. Studying. He's looking for the seam in her armor. The seam where sister becomes strategist, where empathy becomes policy. Does it exist? Why did you stop him? He asks, gentle but blade thin. What were you afraid he'd say? The question pins the room like a specimen. William stares. Charles stiffens and bristles. Catherine doesn't flinch. I wasn't afraid, she answers. I was careful. Careful. Of what? Of this day, she adds. Of her memory. Of you. Of you. He wasn't ready for that last one. Of me. Yes, she says. I want you to have tomorrow, Harry. Not 1,000 yesterdays you can't outlive. A line like that belongs in a book. The difference is that she means it. He takes it in. He swallows. and something inside him shifts, a fraction, a hinge moving. Then he says the truest thing he said all day. I don't know how to live with both. With both what? Catherine asks softly. Being her grandson, he says, blinking hard. And being me. You felt that, didn't you? The ache under the armor. The line that explains rage, letter, threat, defiance. He wants to belong without becoming what belonging demands. And he doesn't know how. Catherine's eyes warm, then cool. She cannot fix it here. She can only refuse to break it further. Then start with one, she says. Start with her grandson. Today. He nods again. This time it's a yes. He turns to go. Another step. 2. The doors loom. Carved oak, heavy with history, the kind that marks who walked in and who walked out. The guards pivot, the courtiers tilt, the air tilts.